Hello and welcome to Dear Franny podcast. I am your host, Francesca Hogi. And if you're new to the show, let's see, how do I describe myself? I am someone who helps people with love. I help people to shortcut the most difficult parts of their love journeys, specifically dating, but also just self-love and how to navigate this lifelong love journey that we are all on. And if you listened to last week's episode, then you heard my conversation with Allison. So you get a little bit of a little peek, a little window into how I work with people and kind of what happens in a coaching session. And next week, there's another episode coming, another coaching session with Tyler. So be on the lookout for that. But I want to, first of all, shout out, of course, Allison, but also all of you who reached out to me to give me feedback about the episode. And, so many of you reached out and just said, wow, Allison, her vulnerability was amazing. They really appreciated it. They really appreciated our conversation. So if you have not yet had a chance to check that out, please do. It's just last week's episode. And now I wanted to just take some of the elements that stood out from that conversation to me with that conversation with Allison and just expound on them a little bit. I mean, this is now moving beyond her situation and hopefully into just territory that's more applicable to you and to where you might be on your love journey right now. So I think there was a few themes that, there were a few themes that really stood out to me in that conversation. So number one is really knowing your own worth and knowing that you matter and really moving past the dynamics in the relationships and just the habit of having to prove yourself and feeling like you have to prove yourself. And also dating people who might actually really test you and really, they think you also have to prove yourself. And, in thinking about this, it really reminded me of the importance of, first of all, always being compassionate, right? Always having that ability to self-reflect and to notice the patterns that are coming up in our relationships and how they might be serving us, how they might not be serving us, how maybe they served us at one time, but we've outgrown them and they're not working for us anymore. And, what was so great about Allison was to see how she had, done this work and she had kind of really evolved to a higher level relationship. So she had, as she was releasing this she was releasing this need that she had to prove herself and to, prove her worth to her partners, she actually was able to then enter into a relationship with someone who was no longer expecting her to do everything and to prove her worth. And this is really the point that I want to make, which is about the importance of really choosing different kinds of partners, because it's really, really hard for you to break a relationship pattern or dynamic or a belief about yourself, such as I need to prove my worth to someone else, if you are continually dating people who co-sign that old belief and that old pattern. And I know that might sound really obvious, but I think it's worth just reflecting on, well, how much am I kind of doing the internal work in terms of feeling more worthy, knowing my worth, and, kind of rewriting some of those old beliefs, but still dating people who are actually just reinforcing. So I'll give you a simple example. Again, this is not Allison. This is just this is a hypothetical example, but it's kind of influenced by a number of people because this is something that's come up a lot. So many people have this challenge with not feeling good enough and not feeling worthy. And we've talked about that so many times on this podcast. I won't go all the way into that self-worth conversation right now. But once you get to the place where you are recognizing, wait, okay, hold on a second. Actually, I do deserve love and I am worthy and I'm ready to really, truly believe that. You have to then really be vigilant and you have to have the self-awareness to recognize how that pattern might be playing out, though it might look different. So an example would be, maybe in the past, you've had relationships where you're the one who, you put in all the effort, you're jumping through hoops for your partner. You're always on edge because you're always wondering, like, am I good enough? Are they going to reject me? Are they going to love me? And all of that. And so now you're like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. So you can very clearly see that that dynamic and that old way of being is no longer serving you. And that's a really powerful realization to have. But then you might notice that even though you're not doing it the same way that you did in the past, maybe now when you are meeting new people, you still have a tendency to be the one who is putting in all the effort. And it might be maybe the person who you're dating this time is more grateful than partners have been in the past. So it seems like, oh, okay, well, great. I've cracked this pattern. I've broken this pattern. I'm good now. But then you still notice there is this tendency within you to overdo. And that's an example of how we can sort of be in this transitional phase where we are growing, we are improving, but and I say improving, I don't mean as in perfection, I just mean as in evolution, right? But still, there is still that undercurrent of that old pattern and that old habit that's still at work and that's still at play. So I really want to encourage you to think about this for yourself. I mean, I have to think about this for myself because I too have, patterns just like everyone else. But recognizing, when you are dating, when you're in the dating phase of your journey and you are meeting new people, you want to just really be aware of how easy it is for you to fall into some old behavior, even when maybe it's a different partner and things are unfolding a little bit differently. And, not to negate the credit that I want you to give to yourself when you are starting to give different kinds of people a chance. Maybe you're open to dating against type, relationships are unfolding in different ways. So I want you to give yourself that credit, but also just to know that, these old patterns that we have, they have their own energy. They have their own momentum. We've been doing things the same way for a long time. And so sometimes, transformation just happens like that. And we never look back. But oftentimes it's a little bit of a slower process. And so I want to just give you the reminder that sometimes the people that are coming into our lives right as we are doing the work and we're breaking the patterns, they may be definitely an improvement. It's an improved dynamic, but that does not mean that there isn't still some remnants of that you might want to just make sure that you're aware of, right? We're never aiming for perfection here, right? Perfection is not the goal. But I do want you to just reflect on this for yourself. And again, this is not about Allison. This is about everyone. And that's one of the main things that I like, the points that I really wanted to make, coming out of that conversation. And then another is to really just ask yourself, what am I normalizing in my relationships that maybe I don't want to normalize anymore? So there's a habit that we have of just saying, well, that's just how it's always been. And so that's just how it is, right? Maybe you're like, oh, well, going back to this sort of needing to prove yourself example, if you're like, well, I just, it's just the way it is that I expect that I'm going to be the one who puts in more effort than my partner because that's how it's always been. And that's normalizing, right? You're normalizing something, you're normalizing a dynamic that no longer is serving you. And maybe you haven't even brought your attention to it to even recognize that, right? Maybe you're normalizing a dynamic where you are withholding that because that's another side of the coin, right? So maybe you're the one who lets your partner do all of the work and your partner is the one who's bringing the vulnerability and your partner is the one who is making the effort. And you have more of a habit of maybe shutting down or pulling back, or maybe you're not trying to prove your worth to them, but perhaps you're really more about them proving their worth to you, right? Like I was talking about before. So maybe there are ways in which you are that person who is actually, perpetuating maybe some challenging beliefs within your partner, but also you're doing it within yourself because all relationships are a co-creation and we're all coming together and we are co-creating something that is brand new. So even though Everybody is responsible for themselves, right? As adults, like we all are responsible for our own growth and our own healing. At the same time, there is such a beautiful opportunity that you have when you come together with someone else in a relationship, romantically, friendship. You know this, right? You know how healing it can be to be in partnership. You know how healing it can be to be in relationship with other people of all sorts. So we need each other. We need each other to grow. We need each other to be these mirrors. And, going back to this example of maybe you're the one who's a little bit more withholding. Perhaps that might have been my pattern in the past. I don't know. I mean, I do know. But this is not about me. This is just hypothetical. And just recognizing, oh, actually, that is fear that's holding me back, right? And realizing like, oh, just because that's the way I've always been, or that's the way I am, or I'm less expressive, or I just am not vulnerable with my emotions, or I'm not somebody who easily lets people in, or easily makes deep connections. Whatever story that you're telling, just I want you to think about that story, and I want you to think about what it is that you are normalizing in your relationships, including in your own behavior, right? Because we're kind of talking about other people's behavior, but now talking about you and your own behavior, that you're like, okay, wait, maybe it is actually time for me to shift this. It's time for me to step into a place of more courage, of more open-heartedness, of more vulnerability, of showing up for my partners in different ways than I have before. And knowing that, yeah, there's a risk there. It is risky. It's risky to open your heart. It's risky to be vulnerable. It's risky to put yourself out there. If it wasn't risky, then it would be nothing. We would just do it. It would, I wouldn't need to be talking to you about this right now. We wouldn't all be on this journey of learning to be more vulnerable, to be more courageous. Many of you have heard me give this recommendation before, but I'm going to give it again, of the book Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And I'm sure many of you have heard of Brene Brown. She's very famous. She has lots of great books, but her book Daring Greatly in particular, I really, really love this book. I really love how she talks about vulnerability and really frames it as an act of courage, which it is, and really kind of debunks some of the ideas that we have about vulnerability, which is kind of like it's just sharing everything, because that's what a lot of people think it is, but it's actually deeper than that, and it's more than that, and it's actually more discerning than that. But still, it requires this courage and this open-heartedness. So that book actually really had an impact on me personally, and definitely improved my vulnerability within my relationships. And hopefully it will for you too. So if that's something that you can resonate with, I highly recommend that book, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And once you start to recognize what's been normalized within you, then I also want to just make this point, and this is the last point that I want to make here, which is, even if you have an overarching goal of having a committed, true love partnership, whether you want to get married, whether you want to have, just a lifelong partner, whether you're married or not, you're looking for that really serious, committed relationship. That's like the high level intention. And that is a beautiful intention. And if that is your intention, I want you to set that intention. I want you to hold that intention, but then also to understand between where you are today and that intention actually manifesting, there might be some work that you need to do. And it doesn't mean that it's like you got to be, years of therapy or coaching. It doesn't mean it's going to take you forever. It doesn't have to take a long time, but there is some shift that needs to happen. So in thinking about breaking these patterns, creating new ones, shifting beliefs to more empowering ones, to more open-hearted ones, to, really strengthening our ability to be courageous and to be vulnerable and to really show up for our partners in relationships. All of those things are skills, right? And all of those things are really required to have that deep connected, not kinetic, but connected, maybe kinetic too, connected partnership that really thrives over time, we need to really be able to hold that level of intimacy and that level of connection and that level of communication and that level of vulnerability. We need to be able to hold that within us over time. And so sometimes, though you have that high level intention, there are still some steps that you need to take. And again, it could be one step, right? But I definitely encourage you. And I did a Instagram live recently with the account Real Love Ready, where I was talking about this because someone asked the question of how do I approach dating with intention when I'm looking to manifest a partner, but I don't want to put so much pressure on myself or every person that you meet. It's a really great question, because there's that high level intention of that partnership, but then along the way there are many intentions to set, right? There's an intention to say, okay, I'm ready to experience being more vulnerable. I'm ready to be someone who actually doesn't run away or withhold when I'm feeling triggered or afraid, or I actually have a deep connection with someone and that freaks me out. I'm ready to actually stand in that discomfort, knowing that it's going to get easier, right? And knowing that this is what it actually requires for me to have the love that I want. For instance, we all have different assignments, right? At different times. And so really understanding what your love assignment is on the path to that relationship, on the path to the relationship that you're in, maybe deepening or, evolving in some way, or thriving or continuing to thrive over time. It's really important. I mean, I wish I could just tell you, it's just like, do this 1, 2, 3 things and everything's fine. No, you are a unique person. There is no one else on this planet who is like you. No one else has your psychology. Nobody else has your beliefs, has your perspective, has your talents, has your gifts, has your traumas. So we have to understand that getting to know yourself, really getting to know yourself, really getting to love yourself, and not just in feeling, but in practice, right? I've talked about this a lot as well on the podcast, right? The power of self-love and the self-love formula, and how we can really choose to treat ourselves in these loving ways. And even if we're not really feeling it, and our feelings will catch up. So all of this is so important and so foundational if you want to really understand what your assignment is. So if you are just saying, and I've been there, I mean, there was a time where I was like, I really wanted to have committed forever partnership, but I also was like, not actually ready for that. Right. And there was a time like when I first started dating and I had to teach myself how to date. And some of you heard me talk about this because I was a late bloomer in the dating department. It was a weird mix because I had like my first boyfriend when I was like 13. We had this very intense relationship. I think it was too much too soon, actually. And it just freaked me out. And then I just like didn't date for like another 10 years, essentially. But when I was, a young 20-something lawyer, and I was like, okay, I'm a grown up now, but like I don't actually know how to date. So like, what do I do? I wanted a boyfriend, but I also knew that but first maybe I need to learn how to date. So there was something in me that was able to recognize at that time that my assignment at the moment on the path to my higher intention of having a committed relationship was actually to get comfortable with dating, was to learn how to flirt, was to learn how to be vulnerable, was to learn how to make romantic connections, right? Not just friend connections, because I was really good at that, but how could I actually be a co-creator of chemistry, right? And so understanding, again, what is that next best step for you on the path to the highest intention that you have for yourself and your relationships is that's everything. If you can start to get clarity on what that is, and you can then recognize that, okay, maybe this next person that I'm dating, rather than think about oh my God, are they the one? Are we going to get married? Are we going to live, happily ever after? You can actually just kind of take a step back and okay, whether or not this person is my forever person, the point for me here is that I'm showing up differently in this relationship and understanding the value of that. And then when you do it, also make sure that you're giving yourself the credit for having done it. And you're really acknowledging yourself for bringing more vulnerability, for bringing more intention, for whatever that is for you, fill in the blank for you, by giving yourself that credit and that acknowledgement, then you gain more confidence. And then any belief that you couldn't do that, or any belief that it wasn't safe for you to be vulnerable, that starts to fall away, because you're actually, not only are you experiencing new evidence of something new, of something better, of something more aligned with what you want, but you're also actually acknowledging the evidence. Because sometimes things can be like falling right in front of us, hiding in plain sight, and we don't see it, right? And so I really want you to see what that next assignment is for you on the path to whatever that ultimate manifestation is. And again, it's not about it's going to take forever. It's not like you've got to, now have 10 more relationships before you're ready for your forever partnership. Maybe, and maybe not, right? So it's not about time, but it is about intention, and it is about awareness, and it is about loving yourself enough to support yourself through your growth and through this journey, and being more loving. And when I say being more loving, I really believe that we're all here to learn how to be more loving towards others, to be more loving towards ourselves, of course, and to receive more love, right? So really to receive more love from ourselves, and therefore normalizing receiving more love from other people. That, I believe, is the journey that we are all on. It is a lifelong journey, and it's going to look different for everyone. So be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, practice that self-awareness, get some support if you need it to help you to really make sense of what's going on in your love life or in your journey, whether it is working with a coach like me, whether it's therapy, whether it's journaling, whether it's literally just coming together with like trusted friends and community, and just, kind of allowing yourselves to be that mirror for each other. There's so many ways to do this. Hopefully my book, How to Find True Love, which will be out in April of 2025, will be something that you're able to read and to really grow from and learn from. But there's lots of resources out there. And remember, you never have to be perfect. So that's the good news. And the good news is also that, even though I'm saying, oh, what are all these steps that, or this next step that you have to take on the path to this ultimate manifestation? I mean, look, none of this means that the person who you actually are going to spend the rest of your life with isn't already in your life, or they're not somebody that you're going to meet tomorrow, because that could happen. So the possibilities for people coming into your life who have that potential, or actually will be that forever partner, those possibilities are limitless. But even just your ability to actually recognize those people and your ability to actually allow that relationship to unfold, and to not kind of sneakily freak out and shut down, and not let that love in, that's just what we need to be mindful of. So that's all. I just want you to be mindful, right? That's it. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So, not a super long episode, but that was what was on my heart after re-listening to last week's episode with Allison. And I hope that you found this valuable. And again, if you haven't listened to last week's, I definitely recommend that you do. And also a reminder to check out next week's episode with Tyler, because it is another good one. And if you are interested in being coached on a future show, please do reach out. In the show notes, there is a link. And just a reminder that I am, for the purposes of the show, I'm only coaching people that I don't know. So the conversation that we're having on the podcast is our first ever conversation. And that's not the way I typically work with people, because typically, they would have filled out a pretty detailed questionnaire. And obviously we have multiple sessions when I work with clients over time. So it is not exactly the same as working with me one-on-one. However, it is a slice of it. And that's what I'm doing for the show. So if you and I don't know each other, and if we haven't ever, worked together, then I would really, and if you're interested in coming on the show, I would love to hear from you. So I am getting lots of submissions, and thank you so, so much for everyone. I'm hoping to get back to everyone soon, but I am going to keep these special episodes going for the remainder of the season. So hopefully we can get a bunch of you in. And also don't forget that I now have a Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/Dear Franny, that's another way that you can connect with me. There is a completely free tier where you can come to my monthly True Love Society open houses and ask questions. And then there's some other tiers if you want some more coaching, a little bit more hands-on, working together, and also really being in the community with other people who are really looking to normalize true love in their lives internally and externally. So if that sounds good to you, definitely check out patreon.com/Dear Franny. And again, that is also linked in the show notes. You can also find me on all the socials. I am at Dear Franny on all the places. And I'd love to hear from you. So thank you, as always, for listening, taking the time out of your day to spend a little bit of it with me. I don't take that for granted. So I appreciate you. I hope this was helpful to you. Have a beautiful rest of the day wherever you are in the world. And I'll be back next week. Okay, bye-bye.